your lawyer. But he's our lawyer.
Welcome to the first episode of my brand new podcast, Not Your Lawyer. I'm so excited to have you here today. Long time no see.
I know.
Very excited to have my first guest, who is a career public defender who represents the most disenfranchised and indigent citizens. I think litigates at the highest level at our county. Is that fair to say?
It's very sweet of you to say.
Okay. And she also happens to be my wife, Miss Tatiana. How are you doing today?
Well, thank you. How are
I
you?
really appreciate doing great. I'm really excited about this new project.
I'm so excited for you.
Yeah,
This is amazing. This is very legit.
Thank you.
Very cool.
Thank
Very
you.
excited.
Thank you. I know this has gone from concept to first episode in about 2 weeks. So it's been
You're an
pretty
ideas
stressful.
guy.
Huh?
You're definitely an ideas guy.
I am an idea guy. I'm an idea guy. So I thought it'd be really interesting to have you for a host of different reasons. Not just the fact that you are,
a host of different.
not just because of how supportive and kind you have been throughout this process, but because of the level of respect I have for the work that you do and how well
Thank you.
that you do it.
It's very kind of you to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I share the story about how one of the first things I thought you were really cool?
Sure.
Okay. So
I don't know. Have I heard this story before?
it's something very recent. No,
How recent?
no, we were brand new attorneys. We met back in 2012.
We did.
All right. So we're in a courtroom and you had a client that went down, was found guilty, that you were upset about. You thought that the judge made the wrong ruling. And the judge was supposed to sentence your client. But what the judge did, instead of sentencing your client, said, I'm going to revoke your bond and I'm going to defer sentencing for like 30 days or
Oh,
something.
yeah.
You remember that?
Yep.
So Tatiana is absolutely livid because she says, wait a second, if you don't sentence my client, the case isn't closed, then I cannot file an appeal and take it to a judge who would make a better decision for
Well, no, at that point, and it can't take it to a jury.
Yeah, you couldn't even take it to jury. So needless to say, Tatiana is absolutely furious, which I thought was very interesting because I was like, oh, look at this. Like, we're all brand new attorneys and all they've ever drilled into us is like ethics and professionalism and being reasonable. And I could just see like,
Are you saying I was unethical, unprofessional, or unreasonable?
no, but you were livid. I remember you walking down the hallway saying, I'm going to file a habeas petition. And I was like, habeas? What is habeas? Like, do you need a feather pen to sign something like that? And no one had talked about actually filing habeas petition. And you're one of the first ones to file it. And then you ended up having 3 hearings in that same case because every time we would get to sentencing, the judge would say, where's the defendant?
We'd habeas her out.
You habeas the defendant out. They'd be sitting next to you. The judge would say, why aren't you locked up? And you'd say, time to go to sentencing. And the judge would say,
No. I did not shrug my shoulders.
Uh-huh.
I said, if you read my petition, you'll know why.
And then he would revoke bond again and defer sentencing. And that happened 3 times, right? And the third court date, you had a full-blown.
I'm still getting anxiety now.
But then ultimately, the caved and the sentence served the time served, remember?
He did.
Yeah, and you absolutely prevailed. And I remember in that moment thinking, my God, that is one bad, I can't say this word, but I thought it was really cool. So that's the background. That's the kind of person Tatiana is. And that, I believe that snippet of a story really describes well how you have approached these cases and done this work throughout your career. So now I'm going to stop talking about how awesome you are. And I'd like to ask
Oh, no, keep going. Sorry.
What if there was a moment or that you could go back to that it occurred to you that, hey, you know what, I think I want to be a criminal defense attorney and public defender. What would that moment be in your life?
It was Christmas 1993.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I got Miracle on 34th Street and they put Santa Claus in jail. Like, if Santa can go to jail, no one's free.
So that's going back to 1993. And it occurred to you back then, that early on, that you wanted to go into criminal defense and
I came from a background of sort of distrusting the state and the government. And so it was, it wasn't like, oh, I want to be a criminal defense attorney all of a sudden. But I asked, like, well, what happens when something like someone gets arrested or something, something bad happens to someone good. And I was told that, you get an attorney, you fight the case. And that's when I decided that's what I wanted.
All right. Well, that's back in 2012 when we met at the Office of the Public Defender. And now we're going on, almost 13 years? This is your 13th year, right?
Yeah.
So what has kept you in this field of public interest throughout this period of time?
The clients. They're incredible.
Would you like to elaborate?
Not particularly. I don't know. Work is very near and dear to my heart, and I I don't necessarily want to share that part.
Okay. And what would, just for the audience members that don't necessarily understand or have any experience or exposure to a public defender in their personal life, what does a week in your professional life look like?
It's inevitably chaotic. There's very little predictability to it. So any week is not going to look like any other week. There's a lot of court. It can be anything from, a basic status hearing to a full-on jury trial. Oftentimes we're double booked. So it's a lot of schedule balancing. A lot of it is in the early hours of the morning trying to get filings out, make sure that all the deadlines are met.
So it's fair to say that as far as the caseload is concerned, public defenders do have a significantly high caseload.
I can only speak to the experiences I've had in the jurisdictions where I've practiced, but inevitably it's been an overwhelming caseload.
And doesn't that hurt the process when you have the most weakened and or disenfranchised population, and on top of that, the people that are assigned the task to represent them in these life-altering type cases where you're looking at significant periods of incarceration, that the attorneys that are afforded to them are incredibly overworked and I guess lack the ability to afford them the amount of time and attention that may ordinarily be considered sufficient or appropriate.
So I think that takes into account only sort of the tangible factors, the hours in a day, the amount of resources you can physically devote to something, but it doesn't factor for, your desire, your will, your experience. And I think that those intangible factors help propel a lot of public defenders to, at least the ones that see this as a calling as opposed to a job, to actually do better because you have more access to the system. You're around the same types of cases more often, so you have a lot more experience. A lot of the things are more muscle memory than reinventing the wheel every time.
Is that why you're entirely incapable of accepting a plea deal and I'm raising our children as a single father?
No, those are two unrelated things. But I do appreciate all of your support.
No, it's not about me, it's about you.
Maybe about you a little bit.
What would you say are some of the bigger, what are some of the bigger challenges that you face, whether it is taking into consideration the nature, the socioeconomic status, the resources and access available to your clients, or the caseload, or the nature of the cases in terms of seriousness and severity? Because, as a private criminal defense attorney, I deal with far more misdemeanor, smaller level cases than the level you're at. You've had 4 murder cases in the last 12 months, which is a significantly higher caseload. So what would you say are some of the bigger challenges that you face as a public defender?
It's probably a combination of a lot of things. It's not any one thing. So it is the nature of the charges. The more serious the charges, the bigger the stakes. If you make a mistake, it's a lot bigger repercussions. If you forget to file something, if you forget to respond, but it's everything from the nature of the cases down to client contact. Unfortunately, some of our clients are incarcerated, and in the detention center, we know that we can access them, we can take discovery to them, we can talk things over. Our non-incarcerated clients, they're our clients by virtue of being indigent, and that has a lot of collateral consequences, like unstable housing, like inconsistent phone numbers and phone addresses.
I remember that when we were at the public defender's office, we'd have clients that would be inaccessible. Their phone numbers would get cut off. They have no way of even reaching them, let alone confirming that even court notices are getting to them.
Right. And so something as basic as talking to your client about what do you want to do ahead of your trial date becomes sort of a challenge. But I think it's a challenge most of us would prefer to our clients being incarcerated. So sort of you take the good with the bad.
Now, just being intimately familiar with the type of cases that you work with, how do you deal with the balance of trying to accomplish the objectives of fairness and justice with clientele that are often who are perceived as guilty or charged with very seedy allegations or very serious allegations? How do you balance those two competing interests of justice versus clients that are charged with so many awful things that society often perceives as being guilty of those crimes?
I don't see it as a balance. I think every individual deserves a zealous defense. It does not matter what you're accused of. It doesn't matter whether you did what you're accused of or not. The Constitution says you get a full throttle defense. And that's all it is.
Okay. And in that sense, how do you distinguish the role of a prosecutor, for example, than a defense attorney?
Well, a prosecutor, their duty, their obligation is to seek justice, to seek what is the truth. The sole, I think, purpose of a defense attorney is to be an advocate. So while I have knowledge of certain facts, it is not my obligation to bring those forth. It is my obligation to advocate for my client, to allow the court, the jury, the fact finder, the sentencer, whoever it is, to see my client as a human being. I don't have an obligation to show, what happened. I do have an obligation to show what happened through my client's lens.
So you would distinguish between someone having a truth and justice seeking mission as opposed to advocate position.
Correct.
So it'd be fair to say that a prosecutor's role, in essence, isn't necessarily of that of an advocate.
It absolutely shouldn't be. They are not advocates.
Which brings me to my next question. Because of all the extremely serious cases that you have handled, the discovery that you review, it's very heavy. You're talking about blood spatters, DNA reports, autopsy reports, crime scene video footage. It is just extremely gory often and very emotionally burdensome. A lot of the discovery that you review and evidence that you have to assess. Where do you find that work-life balance between having to go through this incredibly emotionally draining and intensive work-related exposure to then coming home and being a mom to 2 little children and separating those worlds? How do you handle that?
I don't is the short answer. And I was on TikTok the other night and I saw Shonda Rhimes give a presentation to, I believe, big TV writer, Grey's Anatomy.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Sorry. Shonda.
She was giving a speech at I think it was a college graduation. And she said something that I found to be very profound and it really resonated with me. And she said, if you see me succeeding in one aspect of my life, I'm failing in another. And that is so true. You cannot be everything, everywhere, all of the time. And so I think the examples she gave is if you see me writing the most incredible script to an episode, then I'm missing bath time at home. If you see me at my daughter's, swim meet, I'm missing, Sandra Oh's last recording of a Grey's Anatomy episode. And you could tell based on the very specific examples that she was giving that these are pieces of her life that she's talking about. And it's very true. When we're in the office preparing cross or filing motions or, doing something late into the night and I miss bedtime or, I hate it. And we're very fortunate. I think our kids, I think it's important for them to see their mom working, their mom care about something, their mom doing something. But at the same time, it's tough to see, missing things at school. And to the extent that I can, I try to stay on top of my schedule and let the court know I'd like to attend this event. Can we work around that? And generally, people have been very kind and allowed me to be there for my kids. But that doesn't mean you don't miss things. And so, to the extent possible, I try to include the kids in things. They know a lot about clients. They know a lot about cases, and in an age-appropriate way, of course. But so there's sort of participants in it, and I think that helps me blend it a little bit because then they know, why mommy's not home late at night or why mommy missed dinner. Hopefully, we'll all see.
No, they're doing well. And going back to just the amount of experience and exposure you've had, specifically shifting towards the topic of law enforcement officers, how has your experience at the public defender's office impacted or shaped your view of law enforcement and authority generally?
I don't know that my professional experience shaped my view of law enforcement. I think that my professional choices are based on my experience with law enforcement. My interactions with law enforcement have never left me feeling confident in their credibility, in their righteousness, for lack of a better word. But somebody says, oh, there's just, a few bad apples in law enforcement and they give the whole tree a bad name. And no, it's so much deeper than that. It's the not so bad apples that let the bad apples stay on the tree and do the bad apple things that bad apples do. And so I just, my professional experience has confirmed my sort of inherent understanding of law enforcement.
It's interesting that you say that because we do have a very different opinion about law enforcement overall. I've been relatively pro law enforcement. However, I'm entirely aware of exactly the amount of damage law enforcement not only can but has caused, not just citizens of our communities, but really the perception of law enforcement officers throughout. And I think it has a lot to do with qualified immunity. I think it has a lot to do with something you just touched on, which is the not so bad apples, letting the bad apples do what they're doing, because that has happened a lot. I mean, how many body camera clips have we been through where we see an officer egregiously and clearly violating someone's, not just constitutional rights, but in fact, quite simply put, engaging in criminal behavior. Yet the other officers that are surrounding him aren't necessarily getting involved or engaging or stopping. They're letting it happen. And I do think that has had a major adverse impact. Aside from law enforcement officers, what, if any, impact has your experience as a public defender had in your perception of society or how you carry yourself?
It brings a very specific example to mind.
Let's do this.
And it's not my perception of people. And I think, I think everyone is colored by sort of the nature of their experiences, what they do. But I remember a birthday party we went to recently where there was a Red Power Ranger involved.
Oh my gosh, she should be here. Not the Power Ranger, the mom with
And the Red Power Ranger was, the birthday party was in a house and it was in the yard and the sort of main level of the home. And the Power Ranger at one point, the birthday boy said something like, oh, you got to see my room. I've got you all over the walls. Like, I'm so into Red Power Ranger. You're my favorite. And Power Ranger's like, okay, well, let's head up and let's check it out. And just you and I made eye contact. And whoa. No one's going upstairs. We're going to wait for a safe grown up to go with you. And, it's, I don't think the worst of people in society, but I am very cautious. And part of it is, this line of work.
No, I remember the mom yelled out. We've all seen this movie before, and everybody started laughing because it was all defense attorneys. Yeah, no, but that's the reality of the world we live in. And
I think we see just a disproportionate amount of heinous activity.
For sure. What would you say are some of the biggest misconceptions about public defenders?
Public pretenders?
Well, public pretenders. The clients that go hire a real lawyer.
Yes. Well, look, contrary to popular belief, real lawyers and public defenders, both, they go to the same law schools, they sit in the same classes, they take the same, finals exams, they take the same bar exam. It really is a career choice, not a designation that you get for being less than somehow.
I always tell people, if I get in trouble in a jurisdiction that I'm not familiar with the attorneys and the court systems, and I had to pick between a door that had 10 public defenders behind it or 10 private attorneys, I would pick the room with 10 public defenders because they just have more experience in understanding the temperament of the judges, the ins and outs of that particular court process, just with sheer experience. They understand the prosecutors, they understand the tone, the vibe of that particular location far more than private attorneys who, come in relatively infrequently and handle such matters. And now, what, if any, advice would you have for somebody who's aspiring to become a public defender?
That's a loaded question. Make sure it's what you want to do. Make sure you're willing to devote your time and your energy and, a big chunk of your life to it. Because if you're not going to be happy. Your clients won't get the representation they deserve. And at the end of the day, you'll all walk away frustrated.
What advice would you have for individuals who are engaging with law enforcement officers or coming into contact with law enforcement officers as potential suspects and how to handle those types of interactions?
2 pieces of advice. Immediately ask for a lawyer. If law enforcement is coming to you and saying they have some questions to ask, or, if they're saying that you're a suspect, you're not a suspect. You are the suspect at that point. And so the best thing you can do is ask for an attorney, especially if you didn't do it. You want to have your narrative filtered through your advocate. The second thing I would say is to invoke your right to remain silent. You have that right. You know, the forefathers put it right there in the Bill of Rights. Remain silent. It is your best asset. You have to actually say those words, which is kind of ironic. I wish to remain silent. But those are sort of the two rigid guardrails that protect you. And there's no penetrating it until and unless an attorney has your back.
Slight pivot into current events. And this is something that I've been struggling with a little bit. Do you feel somewhat of a sense of hypocrisy in a system where our governments, wags their fingers at our citizens saying, oh, you stole this, or you did this crime, you did this offense, and we should incarcerate you and make the community whole, while simultaneously the leadership of our government is engaged in the worst, most capital offense. Felonious fraud, or what this administration is doing in the Middle East. This dichotomy of, hey, you citizens, you have to behave this way or we will punish you. Whereas literally the leadership on top is committing the most heinous, vile acts far beyond what our clients have done collectively at this point. Does that hypocrisy or dichotomy faze you in any way?
I mean, that's talking about the macro and the micro, right? Every individual that I represent is an individual doing a deed, right? Versus what our government is doing. And I think it's pretty clear that the government relies on, oppressing the masses. That's how they get their power. If everyone is so busy in their own little cog trying to figure out what they're supposed to be doing next, no one's really paying attention to the broader picture of what's going on, and the more heinous crimes can occur. So yes, it is hypocritical, but, until I think we have a reconstruction of the system, it's going to keep going. So it's...
Yeah. Dude, thank you so much for being my first official guest on this podcast. That's so awesome.
Thanks for letting me be your first guest. It's a pretty big deal. It's very exciting.
Is this cool, man?
That's very cool. It's very, very grown up. Very podcasty.
And special shout out to Serge, who's hiding in the back, helping me record this and put this together. Appreciate you, brother. None of this could have happened without you. Yeah, I'm looking forward to having a lot more fun episodes. We got 5 more episodes.
How bad was this one?
Many more, not a lot more, many more. This is why you can't be married to a lawyer, man. Everything is absolutely a challenge. All right, I think that's a wrap. Appreciate you, babe.
Anytime.